Welcome to the International Women's Day 2021 Women in Leadership webinar, hosted by the Women's Museum of California and Women's March San Diego. Our featured speaker is newly elected San Diego County Supervisor Nora Vargas, who is changing the face of politics as the first immigrant, first Latina, and first Democrat to represent District 1. A resident of Chula Vista, 49-year-old Vargas represents more than 630,000 residents in the South Bay, Coronado, Otay Mesa, and some of the most underserved communities in the county like Barrio Logan and Shelltown. Born in Tijuana, where she attended grade school, the blending of cultures is nothing new for Vargas, whose mother was a U.S. citizen and father a Mexican citizen. Vargas's formative years were spent in San Diego's South Bay, where she became a U.S. citizen and later earned a degree in politics from the University of San Francisco. For the past 30 years, she's focused her career on women's rights as an executive at Planned Parenthood, education as a governing board member of Southwest College, and public health, a calling inspired by her mother who died of cancer. Vargas's top priority these days is leading San Diego County through the current pandemic and ensuring a more equal future recovery for women who have been hit especially hard. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Moss, and I am on the board of the Women's Museum of California. And a big thank you today to Nora Vargas, who is joining us and sharing your story, and you are sharing with us the important work that lies ahead. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, you know, Nora, talk about breaking the glass ceiling. The first immigrants, the first Latina, the first Democrat in District 1 in a quarter of a century. Are you kidding me? What does that feel like?
It's a lot of excitement, but at the same time, it's also a big responsibility, right? I feel a really big responsibility because I am also the first person who is binational, right? And in these very difficult times where for so many, specifically in the last 4 years, the Latino community has been so horribly spoken of by our national, our politics at the national level. It is, to me, an opportunity to really lift our voices and really have a very different perspective of who we are. And so I feel a big responsibility to be an ambassador for my community and for women of color,
It's really so surprising that after all this time, there has not been a Hispanic, a Latino in office in that area. Your demographic, I mean, that's all about your demographic.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, and I start dating myself when I tell people this, but in 1993, I helped elect the first Latina to the state assembly in the South Bay, Denise Ducheney. And back in the day, right, she became the first Latina as well. And it has, the only way we've been able to change things is by organizing and working on the community on the ground, and really changing policy so that we can have that representation. So this is something that happened because of the work that so many people did that came before me did, right? And so for me, it's really I am the first, but I absolutely will not be the last.
What was it like to campaign during the pandemic?
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to always be very truthful to folks about sort of my experience, because one of the reasons why I ran and one of the reasons why I do what I do, and I've been the first at many, right? I was the first Latina executive at Planned Parenthood. I was the first Latina on the CalSTRS board, which is the largest teacher retirement board. I've been the first at a lot of different things, but being a candidate in a community that, was really not used to having even though I had been in the community for a long time, I wasn't part of like the political establishment, right? And so I was told to wait my turn, right? And it's sad to hear that would happen still in 2018, right? Folks saying, you need to build a constituency, even though I had been a trustee at Southwestern College, my alma mater, since, for 7 years. And so, those hurdles still exist for women of color, Latinas who are trying to run, particularly in some of the challenges that we have had at times in South County. But at the same time, I also found some amazing, amazing allies who supported me in this process. And without them, I wouldn't be here.
Well, let's talk about the generation of Latinas and others that have blazed the trail. Who in particular really gave you a leg up on, and helped you succeed?
I've thought a lot about this because I've been asked this question a lot lately. And I think the best way to answer this question is what I call my comadre network, right? And comadres usually are, and I don't have children, but, um, in Mexican culture, when you baptize somebody's child, it's like you become family, right? And so it's this concept of comadre. And so I have this group of women, and some men as well, but mostly women who have been there for me at times when I didn't even know, had more faith in me than even I had in myself. Because, when you haven't seen people do these jobs, or haven't been the role models in these opportunities, well, you're the first one. So it's really hard because you don't really know who to look up to, right? And so, people like Norma Chavez, Natalie Reyes, who's, leading the Victory Fund nationally, Latino Victory Fund, or, um, Helen Torres, who heads up, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. We have all grown up together, right? We met 20 years ago organizing and doing the great work in the community, and we've grown up together. And Leticia Munguia, who, all these people who, we never saw people like us, right? It took a long time. And so yeah, I think all of us together have built this network where we support each other, we work together, we really to break down barriers. And I would say they are the ones, because of them, I am here.
I think it's interesting. I've heard you call your mother and your grandmother, who I'm assuming are your early role models, unintentional feminists.
Yes.
What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
Yes. And I'll tell you, my mom passed away about 11 years ago. And so that, I carry her with me every day, right? I try to wear a ring or something to remind me that she's with me. But my grandma used to sell everything that you could think of. Like, she would buy like Mexican baby clothes and she would sell it. She would sell jewelry and all. So she was an entrepreneur and an innovator. And she never called herself that, right? She would just be somebody who was trying to make a living. And so she did that. She worked at the Mexican telephone company for a long time. So she always talked about why it was so important to know two languages, because that way you can compete. And so they, I think, naturally knew that these things were important and they would make you more competitive. And neither one of them had an education, and so for me, I think them saying that I could be anything that I wanted. And I was, I think, 9 years old when my mom said to me, I want you to see the world. I want you to travel. She said, don't get married, don't have kids, just see the world. I know. And then I took it too seriously. But anyway, but they said, she said, make sure you can take care of yourself, right? And more importantly, get your education, because once you have your education, no one can ever take that away from you. And it's a very powerful tool. So in retrospect, I look at it, and my graduate degree is in women's studies and leadership. And so I think of them as the pioneers and the women and my aunts who really, were doing things beyond their age.
2021 really is turning into the year of the woman. It was supposed to be 2020 because that was the centennial of the suffrage movement to allow women to vote. But the pandemic kind of made that a bust. But with the latest elections and this onslaught of women at the helm, it really is turning into quite the year. And your support of women is pretty legendary so far. So on this International Women's Day, achieving equality, of course, is important, but it's been very difficult for women during the pandemic. What do you see as some of the solutions to help equal the playing field so women come out of this as strong as men?
Well, let me first start off by saying that if you have access to power, any type of power, a little bit of power, you have an opportunity to make the difference, right? My executive team is 5 Latinas, and I'm unapologetic about that, because they are some of the brightest, some of the smartest people you will ever meet. And to me, it's really important that we lift each other up, and then we help each other and we support each other, right? And I think that when you have an opportunity to change policy, I think when you have an opportunity to pay people well, when you have an opportunity to do the right thing, it starts by you, right? Taking that ownership and doing that. The other one is, I think, I serve in a very powerful situation to be the first Latina on the Board of Supervisors, because I really do bring a very different lens to the conversation, right? It's not good or bad, it's just very different. And so, right now we're, having conversations about equity and vaccines and COVID. And I can say to folks really, and it's a very natural thing to me to say, well, our communities are not going to be comfortable getting online. So we need to figure out another way to get this done. And it's not that other people don't have had bad intentions, is that they've never had that experience. So it's a very different experience for them. But I do think to continue to be very intentional and very mindful of making sure that change is happening. And I always say to folks, right, I have 4 years, all goes well, 8 years. That's not enough to change a whole institution that has been one way forever. But I can try to make as much systemic change as we can right now, and doing that with my colleagues on the board, I think is my priority number one.
Let me ask you about gender parity in our government, and why it makes such a difference to have more women in office right now.
Well, I would just say, it has to be the right women, right? It's like anything else, right? Women who are willing to stand up, who are willing to be vocal, who are not afraid to take a chance. And when we were having challenges around COVID, particularly in our communities, I called my assembly member, Lorena Gonzalez, and together we were able to put, a South County Equity Economic Roundtable together. And all I had to do was pick up the phone and call her, and she said, tell me what you need. Let's do this together. Our communities need us. And that's what we need to do, right? We need to be able to pick up the phone and call each other and say, how do we lift each other up and how to make these changes? Because in the end, it's not about us, right? It's really about the communities that we're serving and that we're representing. And I often tell people, right, when I was running and knocking on doors, even under COVID, we were, always COVID safe. I had a lot of ladies, the señoras, right, from our communities that said to me, you know what, Nora, I'm going to trust you and I'm going to support you, but don't let us down, because politicians come and they knock on our doors and they forget about us. And so I bring them with me every day to the Board of Supervisors when I'm thinking about policy and how it directly impacts them, and making sure that they're the ones that are at the table. It's not me, it's them, right? And to me, that's really critical and important.
Let me ask you about being a vocal feminist, because you talk about using your voice and using your power to help women. The F word, it used to be not a good word. People weren't proud to grab the word feminist and say, I'm a feminist. How do we change that? And what do you feel about being a vocal feminist? What are the challenges involved in that?
Well, I'm really proud, right? But I also have challenged the word feminism the last 25 years of my life, right? I mean, I helped found the California Latinas for Reproductive Justice, which is an advocacy organization, while I was an executive at Planned Parenthood and being the first Latina. And so, for me, the word feminist, I've embraced it from the perspective of what does this mean for women, women of color in our communities, to really begin to use policy so that we can achieve equity. And I've always done it from a social justice and equity lens, which is a little bit different, right? Because there's a lot of privileges that I don't have, but then there's a lot of privileges that I do have, because even as a Latina, I'm the color of my skin, it's just a very different perspective. And so for me, being a vocal Latina is something that I'm really proud of, but I also understand what some of the challenges are, including mansplaining still occurs in some of these settings where I'm at, right? And somebody like, well, I think this is what she said. And then I'm like, okay, well, but I've gotten really good at pivoting and being able to say, exactly, that is exactly what I said. So, you learn tools. And whenever I'm mentoring young women, I always tell them, like, you learn these things of how to like tell people, let me tell you, yes, exactly, that's what I said. The other thing is sometimes folks undermine you, right? Or have, the expectations of what you can achieve are very like, well, just because I'm quiet sometimes doesn't mean that I don't have the answers. But one of the things that I learned in my 25-year career in public service is that I'm not the only one who has something to say. There's a lot of other people who need to be at the table. And one of the things that happens, especially in our communities where we've been fighting to get to where we are, to where I am now, right? People forget that I'm one of them. And so it's very different when I'm thinking about promotora programs or community programs. I am those programs. It's where I come from. It's what I manage. It's what I did. And so I'm trying to build spaces so that other people who have never been part of this county are also able to have a voice. So it's not just me. And I always say to my team and wherever I work, right, that God forbid something happens to me, whatever we're doing can continue to be moving forward, that it shouldn't be about one person. It has to be about institutional shift and really our communities being able to continue to do the work for themselves. And we are not, I am not a demigod. I don't have any, I don't go around talking about how, oh, I am the only person who can do this, right? I am only a conduit for that change and that opportunity. And my goal is to really bring people together to do that.
You have said that your focus this year as a San Diego County Supervisor would be on equity and health. And there's a very personal reason for the health part of that involving your mother.
Yes.
Would you share that story with us?
I will. And it's taken me a long time to be able to, during the campaign trail, I shared it, and sometimes it's tough, right? Because it's her story and my family's story. But part of the reason why I decided to run for the Board of Supervisors is because when my mom, who had been, had worked for an organization for over 17, 18 years, and she got laid off and didn't have health care. And it was in that little time span that she wasn't able to get access to healthcare, and she passed away and died of cancer. And so for me, the fact that someone who had given so much to this country and who was so civically engaged couldn't have those opportunities, I think for me is what it continues to fuel me, because I never want anybody to feel that frustration or that sad about not being able to help other people. And so her experience is what motivates me to ensure that nobody ever feels that, right? And that's why I always ask a lot of questions. And that's why for me, it's really important. And this has all happened right before the Affordable Care Act, right? And then so I was telling somebody the other day, right? They were asking me, so what does it mean to be binational? What does it mean to be in these roles? And I am a reflection of the public policy that was in this region for such a long time. And my mom ended up in a situation where, because of rules and the laws, she wasn't able to get access to healthcare, and that was tough. And I don't want anybody ever to go through that as well.
I think it's really interesting, as we alluded to in the narrative that preceded our interview here. The arc of your 25-year career has really included women's rights. It's included education, public health. What I find most interesting is that during your stint at Planned Parenthood as a top executive, it really began in the most simple of ways. You were a patient at Planned Parenthood,
yes.
And then evolved to the top. Tell me
yes.
about that. How did that happen, and how did being a patient impact your decision making once you became an executive there?
Oh, yeah. So it really was a foundation for me to be able to do this work, particularly around health equity and really connecting it to our communities. I always tell people that in my house, we never talked about sexuality, right? It was not something that you talked about. And then I went to school and I was at a university. It was the University of San Francisco, which was a private Jesuit university. So there was no information on the campus. But I had a friend who took me to Planned Parenthood, and where I learned a lot about, reproductive health care and what that meant. And then as a result, I really began to get engaged and understood what it meant to make sure that women had access to their reproductive rights, and what did that mean. And from that, it evolved to really advocating for reproductive justice, because access was such a key issue in that. And so I was invited to be part of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund Board, right, to get more young people elected, participating in the process. And it was then many years ago. It was like in the early 1992, 93, 94 is when I became a board member. And then fast forward to become the first Latina executive for the organization, and to really change the philosophy of the organization, to meet people where they're at and be able to have conversations around immigration, and to be at the national level. And I'll have to tell you, I sat at the table with Cecile Richards, who's an icon in politics, and she ended up supporting me in my campaign. And that was like, I got all giggly and excited about it, because these are women who have for decades been opening doors for so many, and that I had in my early 20s and 30s to be able to sit at the table, because I was one of the youngest executives at the time, and to be able to share perspective of my community and change public policy in the organization in partnership with my CEO to really have an impact, it's pretty powerful, right? I ran one of the largest promotora programs in the West Coast for Planned Parenthood, right? So when we talk about the community health worker and promotoras here at the county, you can't put one past me because I'm like, well, wait a second, how many people are they calling? What are they doing? Because I know all the details because I've run them from the inside. And so it's a very different perspective when you've been on the ground, you've been a healthcare provider, to be able to sit now in this role and make sure that the resources are being allocated effectively to our communities. It's a big responsibility, but one that I don't, that I really appreciate to have.
And also, Southwest College was a very big part of your life too, as being on the governing board there, and very influential. And I guess that was very eye-opening for you as well in terms of some of the suffering that our students here in San Diego County endure.
So with Southwestern College, I think it was sort of when I decided that I was going to take the leap of faith and run for office, but it was really an appointment process. I had been asked to run for office, and as you know, it takes women, 8 or 9 times before they even make a decision to run, right? No matter, I always said, oh, I'm not, well, I need to learn more. I need to, and I ended up going through a lot of it. I went through every, like the Aspen Institute and Emily's List, and I've been through every institute and leadership program that you can think of because I was like, I'm not ready yet. And it's funny because that doesn't, it's just different for women and women of color in particular, right? I think you understand that piece, but I went to Southwestern College, and as an immigrant, I took the 3-year program to be able to transfer through the university because it was all new to me. English is my second language. Southwestern College changed my life. It was the bridge to the opportunities that I would have never had, I think, anywhere else. And so I, being at the college and seeing that our students were really impacted by issues around not having access to food and transportation, and that some of our adjunct professors were living in their cars, right? Because, it just to me seemed like, how does this happen in the 5th largest economy in the world? We have to change that. And that is why, people had asked me, would you consider running for other seats? And I thought, the Board of Supervisors has such a great impact on people's daily lives. And that's what I like, right? I want to help people right now. And although I think policy is really critical, important in the California legislature, and I worked for a congressman for many years, right? And I think Congress can do great things. There is nothing like being able to help people on the ground every day with their needs that they have, including right now with something as simple as making sure that they get a vaccine and they know where to go get a COVID test, right?
Right. And you are in charge of that, right? That's your focus right now, is the vaccination. Tell us how that's going and what we can expect. I've heard that perhaps everybody will have access to the vaccine by late spring.
Well, I mean, that is, we've built an infrastructure hoping that that's what it's going to be, right? I serve in my capacity as vice chair of the Board of Supervisors. I'm co-chair of the COVID subcommittee. And what that means is that we get an opportunity to meet with the experts, from the county, and Chair Fletcher and myself, and really think about, all the different things of how do we make sure we put a vaccine in every person's arm. And, we've had some challenges, right? When it started snowing in the East Coast, there were not enough vaccines coming into our communities. And so what we're doing right now is making sure that we build that infrastructure. We've heard, right, the third vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, is ready, and so we're hoping that we'll get it this week. And so we want to make sure. There's a lot of misinformation in the communities about the vaccine, particularly in communities of color. There's a lot of lack of trust in the African American community and the Latino community. And so, my job is to really work with our community partners, our local mayors, to make sure that we start shifting things around. And we've seen it happen. We've done it. I mean, we've made some big changes.
You alluded to this briefly before about the distrust in the Hispanic community and the Black community. I know when I was a medical reporter, I was astounded by how the low rates of Black women who go to get mammograms.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because of the distrust, or as you mentioned, just the lack of experience of having maybe access to that care in some of our more vulnerable communities. What are you doing to try to build that trust, to turn that around, especially since it's so important people become vaccinated?
Well, I'll tell you something. It kind of dawned on me this weekend because I think we're on day 60 or 61 since I became a supervisor, and I was looking at the fact that about a year ago, when COVID hit, one of the biggest challenges that we had was that there wasn't a lot of information in Spanish for our communities, and so I kicked off a social platform called Conexiones with my team, so we can bring experts in and share information in Spanish for our communities. And now, every press conference that I do is in Spanish and English, right? And I'm sharing information, and we're reinvesting additional resources for our communities. And so, it seems like this is the way it's always been, but it really hasn't. It's just something that, we've been doing this together. And so I'm really proud um, to be part of that change and to be able to stand there. And I'm going to be doing my vaccine soon so that I can share with people the process and my experience. I am my dad's caretaker, so I was able to take it a while ago, but I wanted to wait because I know that there were so many other people who needed it first. And so whatever I can do to help make the process easier for our communities is what I'm going to do. And I've partnered with Councilmember Monica Montgomery to make sure that we do have a pod in Southeast, and then Chula Vista has a large portion of African Americans as well. How do we make sure that they're getting the information and the access, and our API community as well? So, I think for me, somebody said this to me the other day. One of the things that's happening is that, you are the Latino voice on the county board of supervisors, and you are the only woman of color. And I'm like, well, our communities are not homogeneous communities, but what I can do is bring my perspective. And then and the other part that I'm really good at is making connections. So the folks that are on the ground doing this work that I've worked with for, decades, making sure that they're at the table and they're also providing feedback is really powerful and important to me. And making sure that they're the ones that are also engaging in the process.
It's funny. Steve Jobs was quoted as saying, sometimes you get to where you are in your life by going backwards and connecting the dots. Looking and just discussing what your life has been prior to this, it seems like this is a very natural transition for you. What does it feel like to have so much power to be able to change things for the better?
I think I've been working on this issue for a while now around what does it mean to own your power, right? And I've told a couple of people I'm going to write a book about this because, and I finally hit me after a lot of coaching and working with a couple of different folks about the fact that at some point, I've always been fighting, right? I've always been fighting and advocating for something or someone to try to get to the seat at the table. And so now my mindset has changed, and not because I'm the establishment or right, none of that. I mean, the institution is an institution that is difficult to change, but I think it's knowing what to do with that power when you sit there, right? How do you make sure that you those spaces are opened up for others? How do you make sure? And what I say to my team every day is, what are we doing to better the life of our constituents every day? That's what we have to think of. Number one, and number two is, what are we doing that are just band-aids, right? Because it's easy to do like a press conference and a press release and let me show you what I'm doing, this and that. But what we want to do is systemic change. That's not sexy, right? I mean, I worked on Medi-Cal reimbursements for like 20 years. Those things are not sexy. Nobody wants to talk about that. But that's where the big difference is, right? Because that's where you fight for access. That's where you fight for systemic change. And the impact long-term is going to be huge. And when I go talk to, the young girls at I read to them last week, the young girls at the girls, is it not the Girls Club? What is it? The Girl Scouts. The Girl Scouts. I'm starting a literacy campaign in my district because literacy is a huge issue, right? Reading and writing. A lot of our young people at the college, I notice it takes about 6 years to transfer, right? That's the data, to transfer from my community college to university. And a lot of it is connected to reading and writing. And so I'm kicking off a literacy campaign, and we're going to be doing little libraries and all these other really cool things. We're going to have partners in the community because we need to make sure that our impacted communities have access. And I met with these young girls, and I was like blown away by how excited they were, and they thought it was so cool that I was a supervisor and what I was doing, and that I could change people's lives, and that they wanted to do it as well. So for me, that's what that sort of owning that power is, right? Making sure that other people can see themselves in me, and that they know I wasn't, I went to Montgomery High School, public high school, right? I went to to Southwestern College, and it took me 3 years to transfer to the University of San Francisco. And I worked 3 jobs while trying to graduate from from college and high school. And I'm just one of you, right? I'm like a regular person who now gets to do this. And the reason why I won this seat is because of the community that I represent. And I will never forget that. Every day, there's, and people talk about special interests and all the good stuff. My constituency is the community that I represent. These are the folks that, sometimes have to have 2 or 3 jobs, the communities that folks, and I have a very diverse district: Coronado, Point Loma, Benita, affluent people and people who don't have. But what we have as a community is that we're a resilient community that really cares about one another. And so, I tell people I feel really proud to do the work that I get to do. And sometimes I will be honest, and I think this is one of those things that I like to be very authentic with folks and tell you the truth, that sometimes, like, oh my God, I just did that, right? Like somebody's asking about the Boys and Men of Color initiative, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so exciting. They passed it unanimously, and the health equity, they passed it unanimously. And so to me, I still get, excited about this work, and I'm really proud that I get to be the conduit of change for our communities.
You mentioned empowering Girl Scouts. It really does have to start early. I guess my question to you is, how do we get more women in the pipeline so there will be more women in political office?
I think first and foremost, keep asking them, engaging them. My boards and commissions, I've made sure that that we have representation from communities of color. I'm trying to get more youth involved. I want to make sure that people who have never thought of themselves in these roles to just begin to consider them, right? And we need women in nonprofit boards, corporate boards. We still need women in all of these different roles. But I think more importantly is provide the opportunities for folks to get engaged. I mean, look, I know it sounds silly, but my nail lady had never voted in her life, and now she's like totally engaged and voting and supporting everybody. The lady who like does my hair right now takes a village to help me kind of look okay. So all these folks that I like, these are regular people, right? I mean, regular
people that identify with you.
Yeah,
they identify with you, and they're excited. And I think that's what's so interesting and exciting about politics right now is that even though we've gone through a very difficult several years, it's gotten more people engaged in the process, right?
And I think, and it helps that I speak English, Spanish, and Spanglish, right? And so I just have conversations with people, and they and they're able to ask me about anything, and they know that I'm not going to judge, and if I don't have the answer, I'll find the answer for them. And I think that's pretty powerful. It's the accessibility, transparency, and holding people holding us accountable. I think it's important. The funniest thing is people will ask me when I respond to them on Facebook and my social media, right? And everybody has my cell phone. I don't know if you know, but during the campaign, I wanted to make sure it was a little tight, right? I wasn't sure where things were. And so I sent out an email to people and a text message, and I said, here's my cell phone number. Feel free to ask me and call me if you have any questions. And a whole bunch of people did it. And they're like, wait, is this really you? This is not your staff? And I'm like, no, this is really me. And it's still my same phone number. And but for me, it's like, and my team was like, you can't do that. And then I found out that President Biden does it too. And so I was like, see, I told you I'm doing something right. But anyway, but I do respond to folks. And, sometimes it takes me a little bit longer because I'm getting more questions, especially with vaccines. And so what that says to me is that, if 3 or 4 people have questions, that means that way more ready people have them. So my team, my communications team, and I have to make sure we're getting as much as we can out to communities so they know what's going on.
The San Diego County Board of Supervisors is probably the most powerful government body in the county, and it holds all the purse strings.
Yeah.
What are your priorities in terms of spending that money? Where do you see a deficit when it comes to government giving people what they need?
Public health care. I mean, if you look at the piece of the pie and where the resources are, I think public health care has not had as many resources as it should. I think the COVID pandemic has demonstrated, really, it has magnified the inequities around healthcare in our communities. And so I really am looking at this budget and what does that look like, number one. And then number two is additional partnerships with our school districts and our communities, because we are the safety net, and I want to make sure that, folks are not going hungry, that they do have access to transportation. And, I get to serve now as this chair of transportation for Sandag. And so as I'm sitting in that role, it's, really looking at what does that mean for our communities that may not have access to transportation. And we can talk about, and I'm supportive of these big dreams about what it looks like in the future. But what do we do now to make sure that people can get on, public transport and get to their jobs, right? And so for me, I'm serving on Estistera, right, the retirement board for the county. And so, how important it is for people to have, if you've invested so long in your community, how to make sure that you have a retirement. Those are conversations we don't have in our communities because most people don't have access to that. And so I really want to make sure that we are not only looking at the public policy and how we're impacting in terms of budget, but I also want to make sure that our county employees are reflective of the communities that we serve, right? How do we make sure these are really good jobs? County jobs are really good jobs, and you have an opportunity to really shift the future of our communities while working on the inside. And so I'm really proud of trying to find ways to diversify that and to work together with our CAO and other county departments so that that happens.
There has been a huge shift in the government in San Diego and the county, especially with all the supervisors terming out. It's just a bunch of new faces. And of course, you have definitely changed the face and the direction of things for San Diego County. What is it like working with the new team? Are people, are they still finding their way? Are you enjoying it?
I love it, and I have like the best team, right? Somebody says that they're the equity squad, and I'll tell you, every person that I hired, and I was very intentional, right? There were a lot of amazing people who have worked for the county, who had worked for Supervisor Cox. I interviewed many of them, but then I made a very intentional decision to hire only people who had never worked for the county, and they're all super smart. And I hired them because I told them, I said, your job is when somebody says to you, no, it can't be done, you got to figure out how to get it done, number one. And number two, I wanted people who had been advocates all their lives, right? Most of them, and I have a lot of young folks who are working for me, but so talented and who really understand the community, and they're very grounded in community. So for me, it's really important because what they bring to the table, they had been on the outside for many years. And what I said to them is, we need to be on the inside, right? If we want to make change. There's spaces for all of us, but now I'm inviting you to be on the inside with me so that together we're going to be shifting not only power in the county of San Diego, but where the resources are, and how do we make sure we advance our communities for the future. So I'm super excited. The other part of it that's really great is my relationships with a lot of other council members and school board members, because I've been in the community for so long. I've been very, I feel very humbled that many of them have said that they had not ever had, especially in South County, right? There wasn't really an infrastructure for sharing information, and I'm just a very different leader, and so I have a lot of energy and enthusiasm for my community, and so have a lot of meetings with the chambers and organized labor and school boards and my mayors, and day 4 of me being on the board of supervisors, I called together the mayors of District 1 so that we can start talking about COVID and what that meant, and how do we look at this work from an equity lens. And so, I feel really honored to be able to have this role, and I'm so grateful to the constituents of District 1, people who voted and those who don't have an opportunity to vote, who I represent. And like I said during the campaign trail, and to those who didn't vote for me, I want to make sure that they know that they're always going to have someone who's going to be fair and just, and who's going to look at all of the different opportunities to make sure that this district is better.
Since our focus is on women for International Women's Day, let me ask you about the big push to get the Equal Rights Amendment finally ratified, guaranteeing equal rights for all American citizens, regardless of sex. Do you think after all of these years, this is the year that's going to happen?
I wish I could say that it will. I don't. I think because everybody's so focused on economic recovery and COVID, but I think if we really talk about it from that lens, I think there's an opportunity, right? And I think we should push for it no matter what, right? Because if it doesn't happen now, it may happen next year. And And I think with Vice President Kamala Harris at the helm, I'm hoping that she'll take this on as well, because it is important. And it's a little bit embarrassing that here we are. I learned about it when I was in high school and college, and here we are still talking about the same thing. We should have equal rights. There's no doubt about that.
I think I saw on your Facebook page that you had a picture with Kamala Harris. Have you had interaction with her before?
Oh yes, yes. I met her when she ran for Attorney General. I don't know how many years ago. I worked in San Francisco, and I had a chance to work with Mayor Gavin Newsom as well. I used to run an organization called Latino Issues Forum, where we advocated for issues around the environment and water and energy, which are all topics that you would never, not usually see Latino advocacy in back in the day. This is before, we were talking about, carbon footprint and stuff. And so reducing our carbon footprint. So yes, I've had a chance to work with her and her team, and she's fantastic. And the Biden administration, we've been meeting with them already and talking to them about the Tijuana River Valley. I think that I'm very concerned about the, making sure that the Tijuana River Valley was we declared it a public health care crisis, right? So that has been one of the big issues that I've been working on, have been working with his team on that. And the asylum seekers, that's another issue. We're going to be able to get additional dollars from FEMA into the community and to the county. And so, it's 60 days, but it feels like I'm glad I used to run half marathons back in the day. I feel like all the training and the discipline that I had is giving me an opportunity to do this work and make those connections for the district and the community in large.
Well, you are definitely very disciplined. You talked about, you said something earlier about how you don't have children, you're not married. You're just 1000% devoted to the job.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, and everybody's gonna laugh who's on here watching up. I did decide to get a puppy during the pandemic in the middle of my campaign. So Rocco, if you go into my website and everywhere else, you'll see him. But I also am the godmother to a lot of different beautiful babies and people. And I have two nieces that are like they're my life. And they, both of them said, I told them once, I said, I think I want to adopt a baby when I wasn't able to have babies. And that's a whole other story that we can talk about reproductive health and what that means when you planning it out and what it means to communities of color too. But because I actually do think that that's an important conversation to have about infertility and what does that mean and our culture and all that. But we'll save it for another day. But my nieces said to me, no, Nina, you don't need to adopt anybody. You have enough with us. And if you need anybody, you could just be with us. And I'm like, okay, they don't want to share me with anybody. But yeah, I'm very blessed to have a very strong family, and then also a very good village of people that nurture me and fill my soul every day. So,
well, you have very smart nieces for them to even think ahead in that way. Do you feel that there is a renewed optimism in the Hispanic community as you go out and continue to talk to your constituents and people that you serve, from Shelltown to Barrio Logan to Coronado to East County to National City? I mean, and all.
Yes. I'll tell you, there is. And then the coolest part about it now is I have to make sure that I don't go anywhere looking crazy, because people know who I am. And it's really weird because I'm not used to that. And I'm just a public servant. I don't see myself, as anything else with that. But I'll go to the store and they're like, oh, Supervisor Vargas. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, oh, let me.
You have to brush the hair. You have to brush the hair down.
Yeah. So, I know. You have to try to, even if you're casual, you'd have to look cute no matter what. No, I'm kidding. But it's really exciting. I have cousins that I haven't seen in a long time, and they'll send me text messages like, oh, you're on Univision again. Oh, you're on TV again. Sometimes they're better than everybody's working so much we don't even notice, right? That some of this stuff is being aired, and they'll send me stuff and they'll let me know. And then, the coolest part was when I was running for office, I went to school in Mexico and in the United States, yes. Right? So junior high and elementary school, I went in Tijuana. And a lot of my friends, so one of the things that's really unique to this area, of course, and this is being binational, and what does that mean, right? And so many of us grew up on both sides of the border, and it's our community. So many of them live here. So I was getting Facebook and Instagram emails and notes from people that I went to junior high and elementary school with in Tijuana, and they remembered me. And all I kept thinking, I'm like, thank God there was no Facebook back then. But but no, I was always a good girl. But it's just interesting to me that they connected, and Um, the other one, 2 weeks ago, I went to visit because I'm kind of a really hands-on supervisor, right? I mean, people tell me, oh, we're going to do this initiative. And then I go and my team is like, no, no, don't worry, you don't have to go. And I'm like, no, no, I need to go see it. So I went to the Sharp Chula Vista Vaccination Center, which is, our super station, which we're hoping is going to be our sort of the place where we're going to be able to vaccinate everybody in the South Bay because it can see up to like 6,000 people a day. And I went to see it and just kind of how was it working. And we have a pilot program that we kicked off, and and then I was talking to the volunteers, and the gentleman says to me, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I'm like, people were wearing masks, so I couldn't see anybody. And he's like, "We went to high school together," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" And I couldn't hug him, but it was like, and then I saw a couple of other people. So it's this is my community, and so it's super. I feel very humbled to be able to represent him because it's who we are. It's they are me and I am them.
And it's funny because on the campaign trail, you did say government is not separate from us. It is us.
Yes, yes, yes. I think so many of us, especially folks who are immigrant, come from where a government that hasn't really been for them, there for them. And so for me, it's really important because, as a poli sci student, right, I learned that government is supposed to help people when people are in dire straits or in dire needs, right? And nonprofit organizations are safety nets, but they can't do it alone. It has to really be in partnership. And the fact that we have resources so that people can actually have a better quality of life is so powerful. And I can tell you stories of folks who I met throughout the campaign trail, especially some of the students at Southwestern College, who one of them was living in a car. And if it wasn't for her getting connected to our Jack Kitchen, which provided her with food that actually came from the food bank that actually was getting funding from the county of San Diego, and then her being able to get rental assistance, 6 months later, I was able to give her diploma, right, at the college when she graduated, and then her daughter was going to go away to study as well. And sometimes things happen and people get into really difficult situations, and so that's what government is for, right? We are all there to support each other so that people can get a hand, so that they can move and do better. So
And I think people listening and watching today also want to help others, give them a hand up. What would
yeah.
be your advice to your constituents, to people, everyday people who want to make a difference in some way? What would you recommend?
So I'll tell you, one of the things that I shared about, I think the last week when we kicked off the South Bay Equity Task Force and Economic Recovery Task Force, I said on there that, government can't do this alone. We have to be partners with our nonprofits. We have to be partners with our business communities, with our unions, with our chambers. But more importantly, we want to make sure that our communities have the tools that they need so that they can also be helping other neighbors, right? I mean, if you see that something's not right, let's find a solution. Let's think of things from a good intentions, and let's make it work, right? If people can't get their vaccines because there's no appointment, let's figure out how to help folks. If something's not working, give me a call and we'll try to figure out how to make it better. But and I know that doesn't sell papers and it's not cool. Everybody wants to be like on the let's fight and you have to do this. But I really believe that working together, we can actually make a difference and have a greater impact. So I would say, let's get it done together. It's time for not, you or an I, but it's more of a we and how we change things.
So that's how to change and improve things here at home. Let me ask you about what we can do to strengthen cooperation across the women's rights movement in America this year.
I think that we have to just learn from each other, right? I think, if you think about what we've gone through in the last couple of years, I think there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in our communities. And the only way for that to happen is for us to not only learn about ourselves and our culture and our communities, but then also learn from others, right? And go have a cup of coffee with somebody that you don't know. And I know we're COVID safe and all that, or go on Zoom and learn about them. We have a chance to learn about museums and history and a lot of other different things. I think the more we know about each other, the more we can work together and really remember that this is really an opportunity for all of us to step up and do our part to make a difference. It can't be, oh, look at that government, that they're not doing anything. No, it's what is my responsibility? what can I do to make a difference, and hold that elected official accountable, number one, right? But also, what can I do to make a difference? And so I think it's really us working together to advance and then to lift each other up. I really believe that, there's a saying in Spanish, ayudar a una mujer es ayudar a una familia, right? So helping one woman is helping a family. And so to me, that's really powerful, because it's what we need to do. We need to really figure out ways for us to be fighting. When I fight for you, I'm fighting for my neighbor, for my sister, and for everyone else. And so I think that that has to continue to be at the core of what we do this year.
Well, Supervisor Vargas, your enthusiasm and passion is palpable. And before I say goodbye, I want everybody to see the wonderful fashion statement that you are making on this International Women's Day today. Can we pan out a little bit?
Yeah. Audrey Hepburn. I know.
I love it.
I love her too. By the way, I know we're running out of time, but I'll tell you that I never knew what Breakfast at Tiffany was until I used to watch it all the time. It's my favorite movie all the time, but mostly because I thought she was so classy and beautiful. And but I didn't really understand what the movie was about until I got older, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna let it go. Yeah. But,
I love that. Oh, I've got my pearls today, right?
There you go. Yeah, I have a baby throat.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out to speak with the Women's Museum of California and Women's March San Diego. Best of luck to you. San Diego is lucky to have you at the helm, and continued luck and good work ahead in 2021.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Happy International Women's Day.
Yes, happy International Women's Day.
And thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a great one. Bye-bye.